This is a voice memo that I made in 2021 while I was waiting for my daughter to get out of softball practice. This is the kind of stuff I do when reading through Facebook alone in a car. Okay, so I was sitting there and I was reading through a thread and they were talking about pre-softening, and I wanted to make this note about pre-softening. There are 3 different ways that you can pre-soften. You can pre-soften with straight hydrogen peroxide, and I know people say because it is a lower pH that it's not going to soften the hair. However, hydrogen peroxide does have the capability of breaking down proteins. Now, the truth is that when it was originally used as a pre-softener way back in the day, the most of the hydrogen peroxide that was on the market was liquid and didn't have the same kind of buffering and like the cream conditioners and things that we have in them today. So they were probably slightly more effective. The second way to pre-soften, and let me just say, I think that the hydrogen peroxide way is probably the least effective, but I think it does have some merit that if you put it on, it will start to break down that hair a little bit, and then it will provide that extra oxygen to help kind of drive in the color when you place the color on or the final mix on. Now, the second way is taking color directly out of the tube and putting it on the hair first and then applying your final mix straight over. This does 2 things. This has the ammonia in it, so it starts swelling the cuticle immediately. And then also, because it isn't mixed with hydrogen peroxide, when you lay the final mix over it, the hydrogen peroxide in the final formula is going to drive in the pigment in the pre-softening formula. And so you're going to basically pigment pack your final formula. This is my least favorite way, and it's because, number one, it's super cost prohibitive. To take unmixed color and put it all over a head is really expensive. Also, I feel like that much ammonia straight on the hair is really aggressive. I also think it fractures the melanin in a different way and is going to expose more underlying pigment, natural residual pigment. So it isn't necessarily my first choice. In fact, I don't know that I've ever actually done it except maybe on some temples, and maybe on some temples way back in the day. Then the third way to do it is to think of it just like filling hair or recoloring hair. So we all as hairdressers know that if we have a heavily highlighted person that wants to go back to a level 4, we're not going to throw a level 4 on that and have consistent color scalp to ends. We know that we're going to go back in there and we're going to replace the pigment that has been removed from that before. And somewhere along the line, when we're faced with a head of gray hair, a head of hair that doesn't have any pigment in it naturally, that somehow we're going to put a 4 on there and we're going to get something scalp to ends exactly the way that it should be. I'm not sure why we did that. So we have recoloring, which is when a pigment has been removed professionally and then you're putting color back in. And then we have pre-coloring, and that's when the hair doesn't have any pigment to start with, and we want to add that pigment back in. And when we are going to pre-color in that way, we mix with Developer and Color a formula 2 shades lighter than the final formula, and we apply it for about 10 minutes. You can wipe it off a little bit. You can rinse it out if you want to, but if you just wipe it off and leave a little bit of the color on there and then apply the next one, the final formula, right on top of that, what's going to happen is you're going to get a layering effect. You will have already started softening. You will have already started depositing a tiny little bit of color. And then when that final formula gets laid on top of it, the oxygen in that final formula is going to help drive in the remaining pigment that's in that pre-softening formula, and you're going to get this really beautiful finish. Now, or that's been my experience, and that's what I really love. That's my favorite way to pre-soften or pre-color, and I wanted to just get this down as notes. So people will say, no, hydrogen peroxide doesn't pre-soften because it's a low pH. And I have to say, I used to believe that, and I held to it strongly for many, many years. But the truth is that just because it's a low pH, it doesn't mean that it's not going to start breaking down the hair. We wouldn't use hydrogen peroxide to seal the cuticle after a vivid, the same way that people use vinegar, even though they are the same pH or close to the same pH. So pH just is pH. It's potential for hydrogen. It isn't the complete chemical makeup of the compound, and it isn't the only thing that's going to affect the way that it interacts with the protein in the hair or on the skin. And on the skin in particular, because for anybody who thinks that hydrogen peroxide will not break down protein, we all know every hairdresser on the planet has gotten hydrogen peroxide burns on their fingers, that white softness where the hydrogen peroxide started breaking down the protein in our skin. So anyway, I just wanted to put this down in voice memo so that I would remember it. And yeah, I'm out.